Hey everyone, welcome back to More Perfect Days. This is episode 2. I'm here doing another solo episode before we start having guests on. I think when we have guests and throughout the course of this podcast, we will inevitably be talking a lot about work and jobs. Because this podcast is really all about how we spend our time. Obviously, a lot of us spend a lot of our time at work. And so I thought I would just do an episode today talking about what I do for work, kind of my work history. Primarily, I work in the film industry, making movies, television shows, and commercials. And within that, I work in the art department, which means we are creating the sets. Basically, everything that you see on screen that is not a human or a piece of clothing is the decision of the art department. I think when I started in film, I didn't really understand the distinction between the different departments. I actually didn't really know that film had departments at all. But throughout the years, I've kind of grown to learn and understand the delineation of roles within a film set and then specifically within my own department. Yeah, I thought I would talk a little bit about how I got into working in the film industry because um, a lot of people ask me this. I've definitely told this story to a lot of people individually, but I thought that it would be interesting to discuss here on the podcast. Yeah, when I was around 21 years old, I was living in Florida. I grew up in a town called Vero Beach. And at the time, I had graduated from high school, obviously, but I had decided not to go to college. And that decision was largely due to the fact that I just didn't want to fill out the paperwork that was required to apply. I remember we had a class called Senior Seminar, and the goal of this class was to kind of prepare us to go to college and get all of our application deliverables in order. And I just remember not really knowing what I wanted to go to college for, not knowing where I wanted to go. And then on top of that, it seemed like the process of even applying to college was so arduous that I just kind of checked out and decided not to participate in that. And so I was still living at home. At the time, I was playing in bands and I was screen printing t shirts out of my bedroom at my parents' house. I decided to get a job at a screen printing shop in town so I could actually learn how to do that process properly and with real equipment instead of curing the plastisol ink in my mom's oven at 325 degrees or whatever it was. But anyway, I got a job at a local screen printing shop and I worked there for about 6 months. And I was also really interested in photography at the time. So I was going around, riding my bike around town, just taking a lot of photos of like abandoned buildings and just some landscapes in Florida and things like that. Just really figuring out like how to use the camera and what I was drawn to photographically. I started to also really get interested in movies at the time. I was watching a lot of movies on my desktop computer, funny enough. And I think looking back at the time, I didn't really understand how interested I was becoming in film. I think I just liked watching movies as a form of entertainment. But as that went on, I started to wonder how these movies actually got made. I was figuring out, how to use a camera for still photography, and that seemed simple enough. But then when you watch a movie and you see the scale of what a movie can be, I just started to wonder, like, how did this all happen? I started to express this interest in film. I was doing a little bit of like commercial videography at the time, although I was never great at it because I didn't really have a foundational knowledge of storytelling or cinematography or directing or anything like that. I just knew how to use a camera and that was about it. I started to express this interest in film and my dad realized that he had a friend who knew a filmmaker. One of our neighbors growing up in the first house that I lived in a town called Wabasso in Florida, um, our friend who lived down the street had grown up on Fire Island in New York with this woman, Reed Morano, who is an incredible cinematographer and filmmaker. And so my dad knew her name and knew that she was making films in New York and suggested that I get in touch with her and see if maybe I could meet her and learn from her. And I didn't really know what to ask her. She was the only person that I knew of that actually made movies because growing up in Florida, I never had access to a film set. I never even watched a lot of behind the scenes footage of movies. I really had no concept of like what happens on the set of a film. I was really interested and I'd been working at my job for about 6 months, which obviously is not that long. But I think for me, I was just really starting to get interested in other things. So I asked my dad's friend if he would mind getting in touch with Reed and asking if she would mind if I emailed her. And luckily she agreed and she gave him her email to give to me. And I sent her an email basically asking if she would be open to just getting coffee with me. Um, I had already been planning a trip to Philadelphia to visit a friend of mine, and I thought that maybe I could tie in a trip to New York to meet Reed if she was interested and kind of just, yeah, grab coffee and ask her like about her job and her role on a film set as a cinematographer. Yeah, so I sent her this email. She got back to me really quickly, I think within a few hours actually. And she's basically like, "Hi, Jared. So nice to meet you. I would love to meet up. However, I'm really busy at this time because I'm getting ready to direct my first feature film. And so I'm not sure if I'll have much time to offer to anything else." I think I could have taken that and just said, "Oh, no problem. Like, thank you so much. Good luck with your movie. Maybe we can reconnect afterwards." But I was really adamant about learning about film. And so I was just really persistent and I kind of just started to ask more questions. I was like, "Oh, like tell me about the movie. What is it about? What is it called? Where are you filming it? And, do you need any help?" And like I said, I didn't have any clue that films even had departments or what role was even remotely qualified for to help with on a film set. But I just didn't want this opportunity to go to waste to speak to somebody that was such an accomplished professional filmmaker. So I basically said, "Do you need any help? I'm willing to relocate to New York. I'm willing to find a place to live, and I would love to help on the film." And I think she was at first a little taken aback, like, "Oh, this random kid in Florida wants to like come to New York all of a sudden and work on my movie." Like, I kind of explained to her some of the experience I had with photography, and been doing some set building in theater and things like that. Like, just kind of giving her a bit of a background about my interests and my skills and experience. And I was able to get basically a letter of recommendation from the theater director at my high school who had seen me put sets together and things. From all that, she basically said, "Okay, like if you're truly interested, like I'll get you in touch with my assistant and maybe you guys can figure out the logistics of you getting up here because I have to go do prep for a movie." But yeah, so then I got in touch with her assistant, Danny Girdwood at the time, who is also an incredible filmmaker, and got on a phone call with Danny. I remember like pacing down my mom's upstairs hallway and going like in and out of bedrooms and stuff, like talking to Danny on the phone, just kind of being nervous, not really knowing what to say. Um, but being very enthusiastic and assuring her that, "Yes, I can definitely relocate to New York. I can be there before shooting starts. Um, these are my skills, these are my interests. If there's anywhere I can possibly fit in to the film, I would just love to help." And yeah, she said that they would need help in the art department. So I became all of a sudden an art department intern on a feature film. The timing worked out so that I was still able to take my pre planned trip to Philadelphia to visit my friends. And then I would just take a bus from Philly to New York and start working on the movie. And I found a sublet of an apartment in the East Village. Another family friend was moving out of their studio apartment into a place just around the corner, but their lease was not up yet. So they allowed me to stay in that apartment for, I think they charged me like half of what their rent was. Um, I think at the time, somehow they were paying only 1,600 for a studio in the East Village. So I paid them 800 for a month, and I just showed up with a suitcase and took a megabus from Philly and got dropped off, I think at like 37th Street in Manhattan. And this was maybe my second time ever stepping foot into New York City, and definitely my first time exploring it to such an extent. And I remember, like, not really understanding the subway system, so I decided to walk all the way from 37th Street down to the East Village, down to Avenue A and East 7th Street, where I would be staying right near Tompkins Square Park. Yeah, so I walked about 30 blocks, but I think that I was just so excited. I was excited to be in New York. I was excited to see what the city was like, and I just wanted to take it all in. I didn't necessarily want to just like jump in a cab and be to the apartment all of a sudden. So yeah, then I was in New York, and I think I arrived on maybe a Friday. And I started work the following Monday. I think it was June 10th, 2014 was my first day ever in a film production office and my first day ever. I mean, I was an intern, so I wasn't getting paid, but still, I was technically, I think you could say, employed by the production. The production office was in Times Square. So I took the train, I got off. I just went in the office. I said, "Hi, my name's Jared. I know Reed a little bit through email. I'm here to work on the movie." And I was so naive and so earnest. I didn't know anything, but I just knew that I wanted to learn. And on that very first day, I met Kelly McGeehee, who is an incredible production designer, and she remains a great friend of mine to this day. I've continued to work with her over the years. But yeah, she kind of welcomed me in and showed me what they were working on. The primary set of this film, Meadowland, that we were making was an elementary school. And so one of our first tasks was to create a lot of like children's artwork to hang on the walls, like bulletin boards and things throughout the hallways. And yeah, so I went over to one of the big tables in the office and I just started making like children's drawings and collages and like cutting out construction paper and just making all of these elements that we would use to dress the set. And that's sort of how it all started. I just showed up and did what they told me to do. And I mean, I'm so incredibly grateful for how that all happened. I think I got so lucky with meeting Reed and catching her at the time when she was making her first feature. And just the fact that she was willing to take a chance and like let me show up and just help out and help her make this movie and like see how it all worked. I think there's a ton of luck involved, and I'm so I have so much gratitude for everyone involved that brought me onto that project. And I also think I owe it to myself to give myself the credit of working hard and making a good impression. I remember because I was an intern, this was, I think, like a year or two after there was an instance on the movie Black Swan where some of the interns sued the production because they felt that they were being exploited. And I'm sure that they were. I don't know the details of that case, but um, I think within the film industry, there was some fear or some hesitance to even have interns. So when I got into the office, everyone was very adamant that I only had to work as much as I wanted to. You know, they weren't forcing me to be there. They couldn't legally require me to come into work because, again, I wasn't being compensated. It was funny because for me, I was just really interested in like how a production happened. So I said, people would say, "Oh, you only have to work 8 hours," or you only have to be here as long as you want to. And I would say, well, how long are you guys working? And they would say, oh, well, 12 hours. And I would say, okay, I'll be here 12 hours. And because I just wanted to know, I wanted to know what it was like. If the rest of the crew was working 12 hours, I didn't want to leave after 8. It would have felt like I was missing out on so much. Obviously now I realize that like 12 hours is crazy, and I still work a lot of 12-hour days, but, like, I understand why they were so adamant that I didn't need to stay for 12 hours because it really is a grueling schedule whenever you're making a film. But, yeah, I just, started working, and I showed up the next day, and I showed up the next day, and I was as helpful as I could possibly be. We had about 2 weeks of prep, I think, before our first, day of shooting. I made some mistakes. I remember there was one time where I was sent out in the truck. Our truck PA was named Alicia, and we had to go to Pennsylvania to this thrift store to pick up some furniture or shop for some furniture. And I remember on the way, the production designer asked me if I could call this thrift store and see if they would send us photos of some of their like dining table and chair sets that they had available. So I did that. I called them. They emailed me some photos, and I made this rookie mistake of attaching those photos to an email that I sent both to the production designer, but also to the director because I didn't yet understand. Like in my mind, as this being my first film job ever, I was like, oh, well, the director needs to know what the table and chairs look like, right? Like they're going to care about that. Like I'm just going to email. And having like already had some correspondence with Reed, I guess I was feeling like too familiar and yeah, just not realizing the protocol that like no, the director doesn't need to see every piece of furniture that you're going to buy, because obviously we're getting like multiple options anyway. So I attached these photos to an email with the designer, the art department coordinator, and Reed, the director. And I remember getting an email immediately back from the coordinator being like, hi, thank you, but please do not include the director on, you know, internal art department emails. Like, they do not need to see everything that we're buying. That's actually really unprofessional and you should never do that. So that was like a first big lesson that I learned was just that the director does not need to be brought into every single conversation. Obviously, like at a later date, we would show them the tables and chairs and she would decide which one she wanted. But yeah, that was a big lesson, and I was definitely really embarrassed at the time, but I think I also recognized it as just like a learning moment, and I never did that again. Throughout the course of that project, I was just there every single day. I was working 12 hours, if not 14 hours a day, and I remember realizing that, there were certain people that we would bring on, for certain days that were not part of the entire production, day players, and they would just come, it was like set dressers and scenic artists and things like that that we would just bring on, from time to time. I realized that, oh, maybe I could be one of the people that they hire. Maybe I could actually get paid for some of the time where I was going to be there anyway. And so there ended up being a few days, probably about like 10 days in total, where I was actually hired on as an art department PA. Um, rather than just an intern. Because I think they also realized that, well, Jared's going to be here anyway. He's already proven himself. We might as well just pay him. I think it was the rate was like $140 a day at the time. So yeah, I ended up getting paid for like 10 days out of the probably 30 that I worked. But that was something that made me realize like, oh, okay, I see how this could be a real job. I see that working in the film industry can actually be a career, which was such an incredible revelation to me because I wanted to see how films happened as a creative entity, as sort of an art project. But as I worked, and this was a union production, and so I was kind of seeing like, oh, the people that are working on this movie, like, this is how they pay their bills. This is how they feed their families, which kind of sounds silly to say now, but I just didn't know anything. And so it was really exciting to see like, oh, you can make movies and live in New York City and have kids if you want and have a family and like it was just like an incredible realization that this thing that I'm doing like I could continue doing. Like I could make this my life if I wanted to. So ultimately, then I finished that project. Again, the film is called Meadowland. You can see it. It stars Olivia Wilde and Luke Wilson. It was on Netflix for a long time. I'm not sure exactly where it exists now, but it's a great movie. And I can't believe my good fortune to have had that as like my very first introduction to working on a film. Um, and then from there, I sort of thought like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go to New York, I'm gonna work on this one movie, and then I'll just go back to Florida, and I'll kinda have that experience, and I will just continue with my life at home." And, but then after, like, after working on that entire project, I really just didn't wanna go home yet. I wasn't ready. I was still loving New York, I was still getting used to New York, but it was exciting to me. It was invigorating, and I just wanted to stay. So I ended up finding another sublet in Brooklyn this time in Williamsburg. And with the money that I made working on Meadowland, I was able to actually like pay for another month of living in New York. And that was just another kind of surreal moment where I was just like, I feel almost like I just like teleported up here. And I just had this incredible experience of like working on a film set, working with like top tier actors nonetheless, and like just seeing the entire process of a movie from the inside out. And I wanted to do it again. Luckily, I was able to stay. I was able to have enough money to stay another month, and, my friend Kelly, the production designer, was so gracious, and she connected me with some other people and recommended me to friends of hers that were other production designers and set decorators, and I think, I did a couple of commercials after that movie. I worked on, like, a Food Network commercial. I worked on, um I think like a medical, pharmaceutical commercial or something like that, which was like, a little less creatively fulfilling than the feature, but at the same time, like, it still felt fun to me to be, like, running around New York City, uh, making making art of any kind. Eventually, after being in New York for about 4 months, I did go back to Florida and kinda just resumed my life. It wasn't that I gave up on working in film or gave up on living in New York City, I just had never really intended to be here for that amount of time, and so it felt like I just needed to go home and check in for a bit. I was so excited by the experience that I had had, and I still kept in touch with a lot of the people that I had worked with in New York. So the next year in 2015, I ended up getting another opportunity to work on a feature. And the way that that happened was I was in Tampa. I was with my high school's theater department. I was basically assisting them to assemble a set for a play that they had brought to the Florida State Thespians Festival there. And I remember walking around Tampa and feeling like, what I'm doing is cool, but I really want to go on an adventure. And I was thinking, like, I really want to do a road trip. I want to drive from Florida to Seattle. And I was like, I either want to do a road trip or I want to go work on another movie. And then I was texting or emailing with this woman, Christina, who had been the art department coordinator on Meadowland. And somehow we just got to talking and, I said, "Oh, have you seen Kelly recently?" And she was like, "Yeah, Kelly's actually getting ready to work on this movie that's like a road trip movie out in the Midwest." And it just like sparked my attention and I thought, "Oh, like this is exactly what I wanted." Like I was trying to decide between a road trip or a movie and someone that I know is doing a road trip movie. So, um I immediately texted Kelly and I was just like, "Hey, like, hope you're doing well. I heard you're doing this movie. Like, what's that all about? Do you need help? Can I come, please?" And we had a bit of conversation about it, and it turned out that it was this movie called American Honey being made by the director Andrea Arnold, and it was going to be her first movie in the U.S. She's originally from England, and yeah, they were gonna start in Oklahoma and go all the way up to North and South Dakota, and I wasn't really doing anything in Florida. I think at the time, maybe I had this, like, little art gallery that I was running, but it wasn't anything that I truly needed to be there for. So my schedule was flexible enough that, I told Kelly, "If you need me, I'll be there." So that's kind of how that happened. Like, I ended up working, on American Honey with Kelly, and then, on that project, I met my friend Graham Wickman, who is just an insanely talented set decorator who I've just learned so much from him, but I remember just meeting him in the parking lot of the Super 8 motel that we were staying at on American Honey in Muskogee, Oklahoma. I never would have been able to do that movie if I hadn't met Reed and worked on Meadowland and met Kelly. And I can just like kind of trace my entire life through all these points of these sort of inflection points of like just going after something like chasing my curiosity and then obviously being met with incredible good fortune in the process. But yeah, I was able to work on American Honey, and that was an insane experience. I actually came up to New York to see Meadowland at a film festival, and it worked out so that I spent about 2 weeks in New York, and then I rented a van with the art director of American Honey, and we drove out to Oklahoma from New York together to start that job. And I was still pretty new to film. Like, there was a lot of things I didn't know. Um, I remember, like, pulling up to the Super 8 motel in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and me, like, looking over to Lance, the art director, and saying, like, "Hey, like, so, like, are you and I gonna be sharing a room, or, like, how does that work?" And um, he looked at me and he's like, "Dude, like, nobody is sharing a room. We're adults." And I was, like, 22 at the time, so I was just like that was just another moment where it just occurred to me, like, "Oh, yeah, like, that makes sense. Like, why would we be sharing a room?" But, like, I had just been so used to, like, traveling in bands and stuff, and us all, like, either sleeping in the van or, like, all, packing into a hotel room, like, 8 people at a time. So that was just a funny moment of me, like, not really knowing what was going on. But, um, yeah. we checked into that Super 8 motel and I met everybody on that film. And that was just such a wild, wild summer. I have so many stories from that project just about the chaos and the frustration. And it was just a really, really unique life experience that I can't believe I got to have. As exhausting and taxing as it was, I was really up for it. And I think everybody that worked on that movie was just like really up for the adventure of it and was really invested in Andrea as a filmmaker and just like really excited to be a part of anything that she was making. And she made everyone feel incredibly welcome and incredibly vital to the process of what she was making. Yeah, I worked with the cinematographer Robbie Ryan, who has done all of Andrea Arnold's movies. He's now, I think, pretty well known as the DP for Yorgos Lanthimos. I think he's worked on everything with Yorgos since The Favorite. So, The Favorite, Poor Things, Kinds of Kindness, and now Begonia. But Robbie is again just like the best, like the coolest, like most grounded, like fun, interesting, um, just kind person who is also just like so in love with what he does. He, you can tell that he wants nothing more than just to be like holding a camera and chasing actors around. It was so evident and it was so cool to see someone that is just so in love with the process of filmmaking. And yeah, I'm just so happy and grateful that I got to do that film. There were also parts of it that were really difficult, of course. I remember during prep, there was just so much to get done, and I still didn't really understand the process of like, how are we going to accomplish everything that we need to accomplish? Because, like, we had found this house that was going to be the first location. The main character's name is Star in the film, and she lives in this house. And we found a house that was like completely empty, which meant that we needed to fill it and make it look lived in. And so we had to like install carpet and we did a complete remodel of the kitchen. Uh, we actually, it's funny, like we wanted to make the kitchen look worse than it did because it had these kind of like, at the time, like new-ish cabinets from Home Depot, but they looked a little bit too nice. And so we found this company in Muskogee who like demolishes condemned homes and commercial buildings. And they actually agreed to take us around so that we could pull old rotting cabinets out of these abandoned houses and actually use those on the set of the film. So me and Lance went around with an employee of this company, and we went into all these like old, just like gross, disgusting houses, and um, we're just like unscrewing the fronts of cabinets and um, just pulling, just like accumulating, just like the worst like plywood um, cabinetry, and we just like threw it into the back of our like bright yellow Penske cube truck that we were renting as the art department vehicle, and drove it back to the location. And we built these like 2x4 frames essentially, and then just like put our salvaged cabinet door fronts on them to make them look real. But that was so cool to like be so hands-on with the set and, be learning from Lance, who has like so much more construction and carpentry experience than me. I've always loved building things, but I'm just self-taught. So it was cool to see like a real film professional and like also understanding the ways in which like things don't always have to be perfect for a film set. I think like as you go, you kind of realize what matters and what doesn't, and like what the camera is going to pick up and what it won't. And obviously, like they didn't need to be fully functioning cabinets to the degree that they would be if someone was truly living in this house. They just needed to look real on camera. And seeing that distinction and kind of like learning how to pick your battles in a sense was just like really enlightening for me at the time. Yeah, I remember I think some of my coworkers would get a little annoyed with me because I would get like a little like too eager and I would be like, guys, like, we have like this long list of stuff. Like, how are we gonna find all this stuff? Like, do you need me to like ride around on a bike and, like, pick up trash and, like, bring it back to the house to, like, dress the yard and, like, make it look like people live here. I think, yeah, my friend Graham at the time, he was like, "Chill out, like, we know what we're doing, like, we've done this before, like, it's gonna be fine. We have enough time, just relax, and, like, we'll tell you what to do, like, you're not in charge." And I just which is yeah, I can recognize now that, like, I didn't need to be as stressed out as I was, but I think I was just overwhelmed by the mountain of tasks that we had ahead of us and like just worried that it wasn't going to get done. But obviously, like I was in good hands. I was part of a department of people that have been doing this for decades. So it wasn't necessarily realistic or justified to be for me to be worried. It ended up just being annoying. I think I realized the way I was acting, and I settled down a bit after a while. I mean, there's so many stories that I could share from that project and all the other movies that I've done, but I think I just wanted to kinda give an overview of how I got into the film industry and a little bit of what it's like. I think it's such a complicated process that, I could spend multiple episodes going through all the details of how a film set is created. Yeah, so after American Honey, I went back to Florida for a while, and then I would just continue coming to New York whenever a film opportunity would present itself. I kind of just worked that way for a few years. I went back and forth between Florida and New York. Worked on some television, worked on a few more movies. I worked on Reed Morano's next movie called I Think We're Alone Now with Peter Dinklage and Elle Fanning. Yeah, I worked on that with Kelly McGeehee again as the production designer, and then Graham Wickman as the set decorator, who I met on American Honey. So that is a bit of an overview of how I started working in film. I'm definitely planning to take a bit of a break from that type of work moving forward. And that's just for many reasons that I'm sure I'll get into in a later episode. But for now, I just wanted to kind of share my experience of getting into the industry, making it work, and share a few stories from some of the projects I've worked on. But I appreciate you watching. If anyone has any more specific questions, I kind of was just rambling this entire time. So if there's anything I didn't really touch on that you are more curious about, please feel free to leave a comment and I can definitely make another episode. And yeah, I appreciate you being here and taking the time to watch and listen. And hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you next time.